Just introduce yourself about your career, and then go from there. Also, when we were at Pro Bowl week, I got to wear Bob's ring, so I'm super excited. I was super excited about that. So, but go ahead, Bob. Introduce yourself.
Okay, Dr. Paul, I'm originally from Mahwah, New Jersey. Uh, Born and raised in Mahwah area, and went to play college football. I started playing football as young as 10 years old, 1976.
Wow.
And went to the University of Iowa. Spent my college years out there, and came back to New Jersey. Got drafted by the New York Giants with their second pick in the draft.
Yeah.
And that's where I started my professional football journey. The second year in the league, I was blessed to be on a world championship team. We played the Buffalo Bills, wide right.
From my memory, I remember me and my friends watching this game, and I had this giant blanket, and I was watching it through the little peephole like this, and it went right. So that was amazing. So.
Yeah, and then I via free agency, I gradually went up to New England, played with the Patriots for 3 years. And ironically, the last game I played in was another Super Bowl, which we lost. So I know what it's like to be on both ends of that spectrum. Very interesting. It's not a lot of fun. And I actually signed a contract with the Indianapolis Colts,
Okay.
and decided to retire 2 days before training camp. And that's legally the last team I signed with was on a roster, but. I was done with my career. I squeezed pretty much everything out of it that I could, and when you're done, when your heart's not in it, it's a very, very violent sport. I think it's a whole lot different sport than it was in the 90s. Different rules and regulations.
Yeah.
And you were allowed to helmet-to-helmet contact. Really wasn't flagged.
It was a harder game.
So it was just a different game.
So. The reason why I have Bob on is because as much as I'm a sports fan and whatever, I'm a life fan. I'm a living fan, and I love to love and I love to enjoy. And I know, if people don't know, ex-NFL players are going through a traumatic injury trauma situation, and Bob's going to talk about that. Your nickname is actually Kratch. Is that right?
They used to call me Scratch.
Scratch.
Last name is Kratch.
Yeah.
Otis Anderson, Stephen Baker Mark Collins used to call me Scratch.
So did Bill Parcells, Coach Bill, didn't he?
Say that again?
What did Coach call you? Coach Bill Parcells, what did he call you?
I don't know. He had a lot of names for me. And they weren't always positive.
So, what we're going to talk about is, I want you to tell your story about what you know, what the players are going through now, what the collective bargaining agreement is coming to in 2020, because we need to really fix that. The public really needs to know that trauma changes personal emotions. It changes personal health. We know that CTE has been whatever, but we don't know what the players are going through on the back end, because it never gets talked about.
Right, and thank you for having this platform. And after we had lengthy discussions down at the Pro Bowl, people don't really know the backstory, because we're men and we like to keep things private, quiet. And everybody has an individual story. Everybody went through intense training camps, even from a young guy, because I mentioned this to you after talking to you. What I realized is a lot of us came from either broken households or dysfunctional households, or single parent families, and as boys we always nurtured for that father figure. And if you really don't have that father figure at home, what's the best alternative? Besides going to the street, is through sport, and it still continues today. We look at certain coaches in a high regard. We want, as a young kid, you're not making money playing football, and you don't want to let the team down. You don't want to let yourself down. but the wrath of possibly letting a coach down or disappointing your leader, your father figure, really hurts you. I think you realize this consciously and subconsciously as you go along and rise up the ranks. And as soon as you hit college, you're somewhat protected. Your lifestyle's paid for, your room and board is paid for. You have those models again, and you're in the system. And I'm not saying it's a bad system.
No, but
you're in the system.
But you're in the system, and there's a lot of things that the system needs to pull out of you as much as you need to give it. But that beautiful copacetic relationship kind of ends after you stop playing.
Right, and when you're doing it, it's bigger than, even though we have our levels of intensity compared to, let's say, yourself, a military soldier. Okay. But in our mindset, nothing else mattered in the world but winning. Like when we won the Super Bowl, it was the start of the first Gulf War.
Yeah. Yep.
We felt bad. We always respected the soldiers, but like one player, William Roberts, has said in practice, we got our own war coming this Saturday. And it was so, especially to the NFL and the college level, but the NFL level goes to another level because now you're talking about millions of dollars and the stress, not really the physical stress, it's more the mental stress.
Right.
Stress, especially for offensive linemen.
Yeah, it's up here.
And you take it so, like nothing, if the family comes to a backseat, your children come to a backseat, if you're in it, like I was in it, that's all that matters, whether you win on Sunday or not.
Right.
Everybody's getting a check. Coaching, coaches have kids in college. They live an expensive, somewhat of a lifestyle. Nobody wants to get fired. So what solves all that is winning.
Winning.
And you have to prepare, but take it on such an intense level. And when we were walking into that Giants tunnel, I can still remember it. We were going to war. You were paid to legally try to hurt somebody.
Yes.
Yep. I got a call coming in here.
Well, it'll freeze you up a little bit. Why Bob Kratch is talking to you.
We didn't want to illegally hurt someone or chop block somebody, but it was just some of those games were so intense. It was like battle. And when you 8 years plus 5 years of college, 5 years college football, Division I college now, because my son coaches it.
Right.
I've been there. There's a lot of intensity going on between classes and production and practice and what you have to do. And it's just another system, another career. Those coaches are making money. They have family. So it's very, very intense. And over time, when you've been doing it for 20 plus years and that's all you know, I believe it's not maybe every player. You have some level of scarring or PTSD.
Trauma.
Something because you're always reliving those moments, not maybe every day, but through dreams,
right.
Through watching football games, to maybe wishing you were back playing. I've heard of military soldiers that want to go back overseas because that's what they love to do, just going house to house or being with their buddies.
So even for me,
Tony Robbins saying that for military personnel, he would ask them, like, why would you run into machine gun fire to save your friend? Why would you do that? And it wasn't about country and flag and all that. It's like, because he would do it for me.
Because he would do it for me.
He's got my back. And you know that. And that's where Tony Robbins, the motivational guru, just blew him away. That's why we have similar correlations. So yours are more life and death, what some of these soldiers went through. So that's what I said to you. I said, yeah, I had bad nightmares every night.
Yeah.
For the first 5 years because of the intensity. Dreams of letting the team down, letting your coaches down, letting your buddies down. You can't get in the game because you can't find your helmet. Just crazy stuff. Or you're trying to tie your shoes, but you can't tie them. And you just wake up and it's not a fun dream. It's not this glorifying dream. And so maybe some of that was my mental prospect because I put so much pressure on myself, and the pressure. See, Parcells knew that I could handle the pressure. There were some guys he couldn't yell at, and he didn't because they would cave. When he pressured me and got on me, I rose to the occasion. That was a hot button for me. But I think there's a toll. When you have a bad game and then you lose, the pressure going in on Monday. So Dr. Paul, maybe you know this, but you have to relive that game Sunday on film and your critique. Now, most fans will say, yeah, you're making lots of money. I get it. But mentally, as a human being, you're still going through watching that film,
all the time,
the mistakes,
that's right,
and being called out by not only your coaches, but by your teammates.
Mm-hmm.
There were times I didn't want to go to the stadium, and I hate to admit this, and I finally admitted this to my wife. I went through the concussion protocol for the lawsuit. I talked to a psychologist. He had asked me if I ever wanted to take my own life, considered suicide, and I got emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I remember when I was playing my last year, there were times that I swerved my pickup truck at a telephone pole because I was so stressed of going in what the wrath was going to be. And I was making really good money, and I go, well, maybe I was thinking about it. Maybe I was thinking about getting hurt, an excuse not going in. I know it sounds crazy, but that's how intense it was. Well, and when I swerved once or twice, I'm like, what am I doing?
Bob.
It's just,
Bob.
It's just,
what?
At the time, you just think you're sick, but that's just the way the sport can be. And would I do it again? Absolutely. I'm not blaming the NFL for that.
Right.
It's a tough, intense, everything in if you're going to, especially me, because I wasn't the level talent physically, mentally like a Lawrence Taylor. I always thought it must be really fun for those guys.
And it wasn't.
He worked hard. He has so much God-given athletic ability.
Right.
And this engine, this motor that just wouldn't quit. So I always had to do everything at the highest level to keep my position on that team. So, and I've been dealing with it, and I've been quiet about it. And I've said some things to my wife.
Good.
Thank God I have a strong family unit.
That's tough.
Because even though some people may have it harder, like soldiers or whoever, rape victims,
right.
It's still my reality.
Yes.
And I've had to deal with it, and I've actually, I've been proudly sober for 4.5 years. I don't drink anymore. I don't care to drink. It was leading me down a slow spiral because it gave me that fix to mask everything.
Mm-hmm.
And being as a depressant, I was finding myself really getting not in a good place. And people noticed it when I wasn't, I'm a lively, you know me, you met me, but 2 years before you met me, I didn't want to be bugged by anybody, didn't want to be involved in something like the NFL alumni. If I didn't have a family, I was ready to go somewhere. I raised our family in Minnesota. I love the North Woods.
Yeah.
I was actually ready to you know what? I want to check out a society. I'm sick of all the political stuff going on. It's like this noise. But, I have a wife and children. So without them and that support unit, which is really critical, I would have done that if something happened or I got divorced, or I would have checked out and had a flip phone and just call me when you can, and maybe that's a sign of depression.
So, Bob,
maybe you're depressed, Bob.
Bob,
so I was just done.
Hold on, Bob.
Not that I was going to go kill myself, but I just wanted to be left alone.
So Bob, I want to let people know that I also, just like that's why me and Bob just really synced in so well, is because I also went through a lot of depression, getting out of the military, thinking about the suicide. I have family members that thought about suicide. We've always talked about it, and it's always about that communication and that support group that you talked about. Luckily, you had a beautiful wife, and I met her. Tell her thank you so much to her. She's a wonderful woman, and we talked about kids in school and kids committing suicide. And there's a lot of things we can do as a people, as a person, coming from trauma. And I've always talked about trauma now because of how it affects the body. And I was telling you the different ways of how trauma affects the body, but if you change just the way you think about it and how you are understanding your reaction to it, it changes the chemistry in the body. And I want you to also mention, because there's going to be other times we're going to talk more about this, but there are so many people not asking for help as far as players, military, and we're working on solving that situation. But talk about the players in I'm glad you didn't take your life, Bob. I'm glad, because I would have never met you and become friends. But let's talk about how health can change you just by doing your exercises and doing nutrition and doing the other things.
Yeah, it's really key because, the NFL actually is doing a pretty good job. I just did a health screening. As far as there's some things out there that guys, some benefits they can get, health screenings, which I think are really important. They do blood testing, EKG, ultrasound on the heart,
Okay.
Sleep apnea testing. There's so many things, but as an individual, you really have to figure your stuff out, and you're either going to go down one or two paths, or maybe three in between, and I see guys, and I was heading down that wrong path, that overweight path, that over-drinking path, overeating path. And I think when I learned about CTE, chronic traumatic encephaly, and I started doing some research, and especially I listened to a psychiatrist, brain specialist in the field, neurologist. He's not a neurologist, but his name is Dr. Daniel Amen. Really listened to him, and I listened, because the way I was doing it was affecting me and my family, my relationship with my wife, and it wasn't an easy road, but I had to make some decisions. And I see a lot of players, you have to make a decision. The NFL can have a gazillion programs, but if you're not going to get up and go to the screening, if you're not going to sit and talk with a Dr. Paul, they have psychiatrists at these health screenings, and get the help that you need. And a lot of us, when we played, a lot of guys miss the limelight.
Yeah.
They miss the stadium. They miss walking into the restaurant and your dinner is paid for you. You're noticed. We're 20 plus year veterans out of the league, and we feel like we're irrelevant. Well, I think some guys that can hurt a little bit.
Well, they take your identity away.
Honestly, at times it did me. I mean, I was an offensive lineman. We're usually quiet guys. We only get mentioned on TV if we make a mistake.
That's so true.
I was listening to a talk show the other day talking about the intensity and the stress of an offensive lineman, because we're protecting guys like Tom Brady. And you can make one mess up on technique and have a sack, and it's a glaring mistake, and everybody knows it's you. Or you could be the one that leads to the shot on your $30 million quarterback that blows his knee out and is out for the Super Bowl. It's a lot of pressure, though you don't think about that. But you also have to be under control as an offensive lineman. So there's a lot of hidden stress in that position that people don't realize that goes on. And we're anal about stuff. We got to know everything. We got to study every situation because we're so paranoid of making a mistake. But anyway, getting back to that, they don't really, it's up to you. And I know programs are better, but in my generation, they didn't talk about really health and nutrition.
At all.
Eating healthy in your transition after the league. And it's just something where you come down a path and finally something hits you like, I have to do something. What's ironic is we had all this determination to win a Super Bowl, to make an NFL roster, how hard that is going through a grueling training camp the way they used to be. 5 weeks of two-a-days, 17 days straight of two-a-days in hot sun. We had that determination, but for some reason, a lot of guys get obese, become heavy drinkers, indulging in drugs.
For me, Bob.
I'm not saying it's everybody, but it's an alarming number. There was just an article in the New York Times about the obesity epidemic in the NFL for retired players. And now, like I said, The NFL can have everything, but these guys got to want to do it. You want to change your life. I want quality of life as I get older.
There it is.
I make conscious decisions with my creator, me, through personal development, listening to positive messages. That stuff works. And I have my first granddaughter. So having these things to look forward to, I think some guys, it was so exciting in the NFL, I just feel like they just got it all mixed up. You know, where it really is about family, about your wife, about your grandchildren, about your legacy, and moving forward and not worrying of, you know, being positive. The mindset besides the diet is probably the most, you would agree with me, the most important thing. Because if you don't give yourself, if you have faith, or you practice, you know, personal development at some level of positive affirmations, that diet is only going to last so long. That life change may never come. And you really, when it gets down to, I talk to people that I love to help, and they ask me, how did you lose all that weight? How you're keeping the weight off? I used to weigh as heavy as 368 pounds. People don't believe it. I show them pictures, and they're just like, wow, I'm 250 now, and I've been 250 for a year. I've beaten the addiction of sugar and carbs. It was easier for me to give up alcohol than it was bad choice in food selection. But I feel like I'm over the ridge, and my quality of life has greatly improved, though I do have sometimes melancholy, or especially now watching the Patriots, because I think one of my biggest regrets was not winning that last Super Bowl and feeling a little bit guilty. Maybe I didn't play as hard, or I didn't do as well. And I didn't have any glaring mistakes, but that's just the way we were back then. And maybe guys are still that way. But now we have it all backwards. You know, people need to be happy first before they get all this money. Loving themselves.
Yeah.
I've really found the self-love
that's important.
I need to be here to be as positive, put my ego away, and stop having a pity party. Loving up my wife, treating her like she should be treated. Not the old drunk Bob that would argue with her to stay at a party till 2 o'clock in the morning so I can keep having my crown royal. Being there for our granddaughter and future grandkids, and getting the most out of life I can. You have to get to that point where it means that much, like making an NFL team, making the playoffs, meant so much to a lot of guys. And then they just give up on their health and everything's over.
One of the things, Bob.
I can't explain it, but it's just reality, and you see it in society too. And I'm sure you see it in soldiers.
One of the things you mentioned is about quality of life and wanting to live, and that is this ultimate so important. I always tell people survive a traumatic or tragic accident like falling in the Andes or whatever because they say one thing: I want to live. Once you make that decision to live, we will catch you. We will make sure you find a way to learn how to live, not just survive it, but now that you live it. So if you come down from a snow crash from a mountain, you lose all your toes and limbs. When you get back, we will help you learn how to emotionally live with your trauma. We'll learn teach you how to physically live with your new body, teach you how to re-love yourself, saying it's not your fault. Forgiveness, forgiveness, forgiveness. Because we want that quality of life. As soldiers, as warriors of life, we cannot stop wanting to live, because every moment there's a trigger that will change your aspect, and we could end off on that cliff. We could end off in that ravine. But if we don't choose to live, and it's all over. And you said that, Bob, and we've talked about that. But I'd like to thank you, because there's more to talk about, and we'll do this another again. And I'm going to have you on my radio show on Monday night at the BBM Global Network, and we'll talk more about that, so people can call in and have Q&As for you. So anything you want to say before you take off, because we all got families and you got things to do?
Well, one thing is I appreciate everything, our talks that we had down in Orlando at our NFL alumni events. Thank you. we'll get into this later, but you made me think of things coming from a different way, a different angle, which was really cool that I know you share with people. And, you know, this is about us being human beings.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you played in an NFL stadium or you're on a stage and you're a rock star, we're all humans. And just because I played in the NFL, a couple Super Bowls, or, you know, we all have issues and we all work it out. We're all special. We all have some God-given talent at some level where we can touch and help people and discover happiness.
That's
and
right.
Enjoying life, enjoying simple things, not getting wrapped up in materialistic things that maybe we'll never attain. It's people get stuck in that rut, and it happens to football players, NFL guys. It happens to celebrities, and you know, there's guys like me that like helping people and loving on people, hopefully, to motivate them to get out of that rut, to see a better life. And I know that's what you're all about.
Thanks, Bob. God bless. And tell Christy I said hello and give your family a hug and a kiss for me.
Okay.